Hello everybody, it's TannerFishies here, back again with a new Ninjago video here on the channel. In today's video we're going to be discussing the character of Nya once again, and her inevitable return. What would that look like, and most importantly in the context of this video, which decision regarding Nya's return would make fans the least unhappy? What should the Ninjago team not do in regards to bringing Nya back to the Ninjago scene? Now obviously we know that Nya is probably going to come back at some point in time. That much has been made pretty obvious in the form of, common sense. It's very clear to a lot of people that Nya will indeed be returning at some point in time. What that might look like though, and what the actual plan regarding the Ninjago staff's decisions are, we have no idea. How exactly would the show bring Nya back, and what exactly do we have for options right now? How might we see Nya return in Ninjago's future, and like I said, which decision would make fans most upset? So we're going to be going through all of that in today's video, but first things first, I must give a quick disclaimer. Nothing that I'm about to say in this video is 100% confirmed unless I say otherwise, so unless I say explicitly this is confirmed information, just treat this video as kind of like a theory of sorts. We're going to be going over several options related to Nya's return, and one of them may be correct, but more than likely none of these are correct. Like I said, as of the time of recording this video, we have no idea how the Ninjago show will bring Nya back into the fold. All we know is that it's probably going to happen someday. In terms of bringing Nya back, let's clarify that really quick once again. Nya will indeed return at some point. Following her departure at the ending of Seabound, Nya kind of left for the Endless Sea, never to be seen again presumably, but she'll probably come back at some point. We know from the ending of Seabound that Nya ended up merging with her elemental power and chose the path that wasn't the way of the ninja. She chose to go off on her own adventure surrounded by the sea and things that she liked, and during the finale of Seabound, we literally saw her happy in this new environment. So it's not like being a ninja is on her priority list right now. We also know that Nya's personality has changed ever so slightly. She seems to be a little bit more serious and a little bit more oblivious in terms of common human feelings, as she really didn't show all that much emotion during the finale of Seabound, at least not like the other ninja did. She showed some emotion during the finale of Seabound, but it wasn't near as emotional as it was for maybe Jay or Kai. So we know that Nya is going to be a little bit different, but of course it's very likely that she will return at some point in time. The timing itself though is also something that we need to discuss. I feel like Ninjago should definitely wait a while before bringing Nya back. This is a point that I've discussed in several videos as well, but Nya's sacrifice needs to mean something. She sacrificed her own physical body and her own relationships to save the Ninjago city from Wajira and the wrath of Kalmar. How exactly would that sacrifice mean anything if Nya was to just return, without any consequences, literally in the next season? It wouldn't make all that much sense, and it would be very similar to that of Zane's sacrifice from season 3. The sacrifices of Zane and Nya are often compared, but I feel like the difference is Nya's actually meant something. Zane's did, don't get me wrong, Zane's sacrifice definitely meant something, but he returned literally right away in the same episode. Nya is gone, but she's not dead, if that makes sense. She's still out there and she still might return at some point, but in a lot of ways, Nya's sacrifice hits a lot harder, and I feel like the actual Ninjago fanbase needs to reflect on this too, and actually feel what the characters in the show are feeling. The way to do that is to not have Nya return immediately following the ending of Seabound, which I'm glad the show didn't. I'm glad the show left Nya on her own in the middle of the ocean, surrounded by things that she loves. It wasn't like a big tease that she was going to return to the ninja team anytime soon. As far as Seabound's ending is concerned, Nya has left the team permanently. Of course, we as Ninjago fans know that Nya's departure is anything but permanent. But in terms of the timing, I definitely think the series should wait a while before attempting to bring Nya back. It would just make her sacrifice a little bit more meaningful, and it would ultimately make for better storytelling overall. At least that's just my opinion. I feel like the Ninjago team could totally skip next season regarding Nya, and maybe have her come back in the season following the next season, so sometime late next year for 2022. That would give fans enough time to actually feel the impact of Nya's departure, and as such it would make her sacrifice a little bit more meaningful, as opposed to someone like Zane's, whose sacrifice meant very little as he returned in the same episode where he departed, which in comparison did not mean all that much. Now in terms of the options of how to bring Nya back, like I said, we do have a couple of options here. I have 3 options ready for you guys. Each one is going to have issues, so do keep that in mind, and each one will probably not gain the overall collective approval of the Ninjago fanbase, so keep that in mind as well. For option 1, you could bring back Nya to the ninja team and get rid of her NRG form and bringing her back as a purely human version of Nya. Obviously, option 1 here, like I said, has some problems. For one, getting rid of all consequences regarding Nya's sacrifice is probably not a good idea. I know Nya's transition from the physical form to the NRG form is quite a big transformation, and having Nya come back from that form without any repercussions whatsoever would seem a little cheap and a little bit, unrealistic. Kind of rich talking about realism in a show about magical ninjas with dragons, but you get my point point here. You understand what I'm trying to go for. It would make the sacrifice not seem as meaningful as it's supposed to be. This is something that Zane's sacrifice also did very well. He actually had some consequences of returning. He was in a new titanium shell. Zane was no longer in his humanoid form, if that makes sense. Granted, Zane was never a human, but you get the point. With Nya, I think it would be almost disrespectful if you brought her back just as a human, completely disregarding the NRG form. And like I said, it would make the sacrifice seem not all that meaningful. I feel like Nya should definitely retain that NRG form to make the sacrifice seem, somewhat impactful, somewhat memorable, and also something that matters, if that makes sense. So for option 1, I'm not a big fan of that. I think if Nya were to return at some point, she should retain her NRG form in some capacity. So in terms of option 2, let's just dive straight into that. Nya returns to the ninja team, but her NRG form sticks, and she can no longer transition into her human form. The problems with this are also very apparent. For one, I don't think that Nya would be able to recognize herself as a ninja. Like we mentioned earlier in the video, her personality changed ever so slightly following her transformation, so having her come back as a purely elemental being in her NRG form wouldn't really make for all that interesting of interactions with her and the rest of the ninja team. Her personality wouldn't really be the same. As such, her relationships wouldn't really be the same, so her relationship to Jay and Kai, for example, might be a little awkward and a little bit non-existent if Nya were to come back as her NRG form, and having her come back as a purely elemental being, while it would actually showcase some of the consequences of Nya's sacrifice, I don't think it would be all that great in terms of storytelling and also development for the ninja team. She would essentially be a shell with no personality, so I don't think that's the option to go with either, though it would very much, I guess, showcase the consequences of her sacrifice, like I mentioned earlier. The third and final option that we're going to be exploring in today's video is the option of Nya keeping her NRG form, but allowing herself to switch back and forth from human to NRG form. That way her human form and her NRG form can intertwine with each other, and she could basically possess both bodies whenever she wants. This is the option that I think is most likely to happen, and the one that I would personally prefer. I feel like if Nya were to return at some point in time, her human form needs to be acknowledged in some way. She needs to be a ninja again. And obviously, as an elementally charged being who is basically the physical embodiment of the ocean, I'm not sure how much ninja action is going to be going on Nya's side. So having her switch back and forth from human to elemental being would very much make sense. We saw this happening with some of the other ninja earlier on in the series. Whenever they would try to perform an elemental attack, they could switch over to their NRG form. I feel like we could see something similar happening with Nya in the next couple of Ninjago seasons if she is going to return in this way. I feel like Nya going back and forth from her human to her NRG form is something that we could very much see, because once again, it's also very realistic to the standards also set by the show. Ninja can go back and forth from their human form to their NRG form as a way of powering up a massive elemental attack. Nya could basically switch into her NRG form whenever she needs to attack or use her water powers, and then switch back to her human form when that attack is done. In a lot of ways, this is essentially a huge compromise to all corners of the Ninjago fanbase. You could keep Nya's human form and her NRG form in one place, and it would also make for a very interesting arc to see Nya try to return to her human form following her transformation. During Seabound, we saw her train to transition into that new NRG form, so who's to say she can't train to switch back to her human form, or maybe learn how to control both aspects of this new transformation. In Seabound, it was mentioned how the transformation was permanent, but I feel like in Ninjago, nothing is permanent. You could basically switch around anything that you want, and I feel like if they really wanted to have Nya find a loophole, to get out of this new transformed state, she very well could, and even perhaps go back and forth like I suggested earlier. This keeps the consequences of Nya's sacrifice, while also opening the door to other Ninjago fans who just want to see Nya back as we knew her. And that's basically what I have for option 3. I feel like this would be the best way to bring Nya back while also keeping fans happy. Having her transform at will back and forth from her NRG to her human form might make for an interesting story, and it might make a lot of Ninjago fans happy, but I feel like the consequences of Nya's sacrifice need to be met in some way. If they decide to bring Nya back without having any consequences to her sacrifice whatsoever, that, in my opinion, would not make for a good Nya return. So in terms of what not to do regarding Nya's return, I feel like the show should focus on making her sacrifice matter and not having it be too short-handed by her eventual return. I feel like if Nya does indeed come back at some point in Ninjago's future, she needs to retain her NRG form in some way, otherwise it's just going to feel like the sacrifice meant nothing. This curse needs to be on her forever, much like it was for several other ninja that changed, and I feel like the show is very much capable of doing just that. How, when, and where we'll see Nya return right now is up for debate, but I feel like she will come back at some point in Ninjago's future, and we as Ninjago fans just need to be patient and hope for the best, and hope that the show doesn't undermine Nya's transformation or make her sacrifice seem any less meaningful. So with that being said, you guys, that's going to pretty much wrap it up up for this video here today, just going over a couple of options as to how the show could actually bring Nya back into the Ninjago scene. How do you think they'll handle the return of Nya, or are you one of those people that thinks that Nya probably will never come back? Leave all your thoughts down below in the comments, you guys, and hopefully you enjoyed today's video. That's going to pretty much wrap it up from my thoughts here today. Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed, feel free to like, comment, subscribe, do all that fun stuff, and check out the links down below in the description for other forms of social media. As always, big shout out goes out to my Patreon supporters, including once again the marvelous Jan. Thank you guys so much for checking out this video once again. My name is TannerFishies, and with that I bid you farewell.